I have a hard time hearing you, Todd. I don't know why, because
Yeah, I can't hear him either.
I will speak up louder. Quick mask. There we go. All right, almost back up on YouTube. One more second.
But we can't hear you.
is your volume up?
Yeah, I'll turn the volume up. Okay, we're back live.
Is Todd talking? Because I can't hear him at all.
Can you see it list moving?
All right.
Yeah.
Is it better? Can you hear?
No.
No, can't hear.
No.
I can just hear a little mumbling in the background. That's all.
I'll work on the microphone. Can you?
Okay, so as Todd is working on his microphone, I'd like to make a motion, Region 9 Board of Education approve the collective bargaining agreement with the JBEA for the 2021 through 2023 school years as negotiated.
Okay, it says through 24 on the agenda.
Did I say 20?
You
Yeah,
said
you said
23. I think it is 24.
24. I'm sorry. I
Okay.
thinking and writing doesn't work sometimes for me. So yes, it's the 2021 through.
Okay, so motion for the Region
2024.
9 Board of Education to approve the collective bargaining agreement with the JBEA for the 2021 through 2024 school year.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Second, Gwen. All right, we'll open it for discussion.
So, no, go ahead.
No, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that, as part of this, I think it's important to recognize our exemplary staff and their commitment to our children and their well-being and their learning. And so it was really a great process to work collaboratively with, my fellow committee members and with the representative of the JBEA, again, working towards an agreement that, is in the best interests of not only our communities, but primarily of our students. And that's been our focus all along. And so we appreciate that collaboration, and we look forward to many years of collaboration in the future. So, but again, I do want to thank my fellow negotiating team, Todd and Maureen and Cheryl, and the administration as well. We had a couple late sessions, and again, wearing the masks and everything, trying to get through this. But I think in the end, it worked out really well for everyone, and for most importantly for our students. So, thank you.
Thank you all for doing it.
Who was the second on that motion?
Gwen.
One. Thank you.
All right, any other comment? I too would like to thank everyone for their support and going through all the discussions that we've had, and the association for their cooperation and working through the agreement with us as well. So if no other discussion, we'll go ahead and vote on the motion to approve the agreement for 2021 through 2024 and authorize the board chair to sign. So all board members in favor, if you can signify by saying aye, raising your hand so we can get a count.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. All right, it looks like we got unanimous 8-0. All right, so the motion passes. All right, so we will work to get that signed with the association president. Thank you. All right, we'll move on then to the next item on discussion and possible action, an update on providing the all-in model. And I'm sure who would like to start, Dr. Harrison or Dr.
I'll start us
Hugo?
off.
Okay, great. All right, go ahead.
So board members, you'll remember that I shared with all of you and the community that at this meeting, we would talk about the steps that need to be taken as we're considering going all in with our students at Joe Barlow High School. Originally, our plan, of course, was to move forward with bringing all students all in on October 5th. And one of the concerns that we noted was related to the density in the school and just the challenge with not being able to social distance at the high school level. So Dr. Penn is going to share some detailed information with you. Before she does, I do want to just note a couple of things. So the first is just prior to the start of this meeting, I sent an email to all of our high school families and staff, notifying them that we had a positive case here at the school. And of course, we within the district, we had 2 positive cases at Reading Elementary School. Each case is unique in the contact tracing and working with our local health officials to determine next steps. And so in this case at the high school, because of the contact tracing that was done, we were able to confirm that no action needed to be taken as far as closing the building and that none of our students or staff have been exposed. But it is, of course, important to keep that open line of communication with our families. The other thing that we did as part of this in preparation for tonight, and as part of kind of the ongoing monitoring the health of our district and our communities, is that we reached out to our 2 health directors. So Mark Cooper, who works with our Easton schools, and then also Doug Hartline, who's the Reading health director. And essentially we asked, are there any concerns that we need to be keeping at the forefront as we're considering bringing all students back in? Mark shared that as the cold weather sets in, one of the things that we want to be conscious of is that as the weather, as it gets colder, people are spending more time inside and having more social gatherings inside. And so that's something that we want to keep an eye on. And what we're starting to see locally is some upticks in the number of positive cases. And said, you know, as we're considering next steps, to be prepared that we may need to move back into hybrid should the data cause us to need to make that change. We had a number of conversations with Doug Hartline from Reading, and he shared that initially he confirmed that you know, based on our health data, that, you know, with caution, that it made sense to move forward. However, he shared via email that he had a renewed sense of caution concerning the proposal to transition to all in, with cases in the state and nearby towns picking up, along with some of the issues that we've already noted with upper grade level schools as far as cohorting, that he recommended that we pause for now with increasing the number of students coming into the building at Joe Barlow and reevaluate down the road. So that prompted me to ask 2 follow-up questions. 1, when should we reevaluate? And then 2, what about the implications for our K-8 schools? And of course, he noted that K-8 is different because of the ability to cohort and to be able to do contact tracing more efficiently because students are in cohorts. And as far as the question of when to evaluate, he said really much of it depends on the trends throughout the state and in the region and how schools are doing in general. So there is a number of superintendent networks that I'm a part of, and I know Dr. Penn is also part of those same networks as far as principals and heads of school. And so we're always watching and listening to any recommended changes or any positive cases that we're seeing in surrounding towns. And so we'll continue to monitor that. He said it's really hard to kind of pinpoint exactly when would be the best time to make that, to consider that change, but it will be something that we will continue to look at. And then finally, we got some information from Dr. Leibowitz, who's our medical advisor, and he essentially said that, given the projected trends across our area, that we could be seeing an inevitable shutdown sooner than later. And so he really cautioned from a public health perspective to really consider the level of density in the building. So those are all of the things that naturally will be a part of the decision-making process. In addition to, I just wanted to provide some context in addition to what Dr. Penn is sharing tonight, because really, when we started this process in discussion, it was really focused on more of the logistical challenges that she'll be noting tonight. But I did want to bring forward the health perspective following the conversations that we had with Mark, Doug, and also Dr. Leibowitz.
Yep.
Todd, can I have permission to share my
Yes,
screen?
you should be. Cohorts.
Beautiful. Okay.
All right,
There
we'll get
we
to your screen.
go. Okay. So thank you. And I am going to ask Seth, could you pass that way? And there's a copy for those of you donning masks and joining us in person. Okay. So thank you for allowing me to share this information with you. And after tonight's meeting, this whole presentation will be put online and you'll be able to see it in person if you don't have a hard copy in front of you. So what I'd like to cover tonight are the decisions that need to be made in order to open all in. And I wanted to start by just very quickly reviewing where we are right now. So beginning on October 5th, we instituted a hybrid model that works with 4 different cohorts. So we have Cohort A, which is our A through K, and Cohort B, which is our L through Z students. And you could see Cohort A is attending in person on Mondays and Tuesdays and every other Wednesday. Cohort B is attending every other Wednesday and Thursday and Friday. Those are the in-person learning times. And then, as you heard Max allude to, we have distance learning times. So when students are not in front of us, they're learning from home. We also have Cohort C. That represents our temporary learning from home students. And they are in a distance learning educational model the entire time. We also have Cohort D. So Cohort D are our students that began in our hybrid model as students that required attendance every day. It may have been for a special education, IEP service need. It may have been for a 504. As we've continued in our hybrid model, we're seeing more technology needs, more family needs, social and emotional learning needs. And so it may justify a switch from a Cohort A and B to a Cohort D, where students are attending every day. Because of our spacing, we do have limited spaces in Cohort D. So you see that second bullet in the middle talks about Cohort D numbers not exceeding Cohort C in order to keep our safety numbers there. And we could be very creative with lunch waves and anything we need to do. But right now we're okay in our numbers. And we have a process that we go through if a family is requesting a Cohort D enrollment. When we look at our numbers, if we break up Cohort D into their alpha order, what we're seeing on Mondays and Tuesdays is about 414 students at this time. And on Thursdays and Fridays, the cohorts are about 400 in person. So it is a pretty even split between those. So that's what we're doing right now. And you can see that that's what our schedule looks like. So we run a Falcon day, which means every period meets. It's a very consistent daily schedule. And we started this schedule to get the maximum contact time, not knowing when we would have to go out again. It made sense to have shorter periods and the maximum cohort time. So as Max alluded to in his student report, I not only asked students, but I also asked parents and then staff a few questions. And what you see here is a summary of their responses. So you can look on the left-hand side of the screen to see the numbers of people that we had responded to the survey. The large number of student respondents is that we tied this into an attendance survey. And so we had 724 of our 800 plus students that responded. We had 439 parents that responded to the short survey, and then 96 staff members. That includes support staff as well as teachers. So that's why that number is actually higher than our certified teacher rate. And I don't know if it's surprising to people, but when you look at the percentage of those responding to say they would prefer to stay in hybrid, students were about half, about 48% of those respondents, about half of the parents, 55%, and more than that, that 69% of the staff responded that they would prefer to stay in hybrid. I also asked, they had to choose, would they prefer to stay in hybrid, would they prefer to be all in? So when you look at the all in model, you could see that students were about 33%, parents 37%, staff about 16%. And then they could also choose that they had no preference between models. So about 13% of the students said they had no preference, about 16% of the staff. The parents definitely had preferences. Only about 4% of the parents fell in that middle line. So it just gives a little context into where the opinions of the school are, and there's arguments to be made for both sides. And even when you look at that graph. So then I wanted to take you to this slide, recognizing that this is not an economic decision. It's important that the board understands our estimate of what the costs would be if we were going to move into an all-in model. These are just estimates. So when we look at safety, which is one of our considerations, our major consideration, you look at safety in the morning and the afternoon, and I'm looking at traffic. I'll speak a little bit more about all of these points in the slides that follow, but that's a consideration that we need to look at, some action steps we need to take. We look at a custodian for extra cleaning and cleaning the cafeteria and cleaning the building. We look at extra monitors for mornings and for hallways. We look to our HVAC. So we look at bathrooms that we have a set of bathrooms that only have a supply air and no exhaust. So we had some estimates of what that would be to exhaust air out of those rooms. We look at the cafeteria fans. Right now in our cafeteria, we had a large air conditioning unit, which is out now. Obviously, the weather's getting colder. The HVAC in that cafeteria, as the board knows, because we were working on this project before, it needs some upgrade and some replacement. So we can look at putting fans in at a lower cost that would again exhaust the air out of the cafeteria. And I put in the capital project to replace and upgrade the full project, and again, just approximates. The lower gym, same situation with HVAC. We can put in large fans. Some of the board did a walkthrough with us and saw where those fans might be in those rooftop areas. And then thanks to our incredible problem solving of Walter Zudak, we thought this would be a very high ticket item, which were these dividers that we can put in our, for our desks. And Walter found an amazing solution to this that was approved with our Department of Health with Doug Hartline and at a much lower cost. So I'll talk more about that when we go through, but just to keep that in mind as we dig deeper into this. So this slide is very familiar to you, to the public. These are all of the considerations, all of those reopening categories that we look at. And what I want to focus on are just those middle ones: scheduling, transportation, academics, health, safety, and facilities. So what do we need to consider in scheduling, in coming back all in? We would like to look at a black gold rotation. There are some benefits to a black gold. For those of you who do not know our schedule, a black gold involves 4 periods a day. There are the biggest benefit we saw with this, or one of the big benefits, is it allows us to feed all the children. That's important. We know in our neighboring towns, the lack of ability to provide lunch for everyone has actually kept some of our neighboring schools in hybrid. But we have a schedule that would allow an all-in. We'd be able to have those additional lunch shifts. And there are other benefits. We know that it would reduce the transition that students would have to make from a transition of an every period day to just 4 periods, so less time in the hallway. We can't cohort. You heard Dr. Harrison say that, but it would allow us to keep that exposure to a minimum when they are in the hallway. The pace would be slower of the day. There are challenges to a black gold schedule. One of, I guess, the greatest challenge is a student who was to miss a class may miss fewer classes, but they could miss more content in a longer period of time. The other challenge, I think, to the teaching staff would be everything is different in teaching with a mask on and teaching 6 feet away from students. And so some of those activities that we are used to doing in those longer classes, teachers would not be able to do. And so that's a concern. And that leads us to probably the greatest challenge of students, and teachers would need to adjust to a new way of teaching and learning. This is what our schedule would look like. And you could see those lunch periods underneath that schedule. What is exciting about this, as excited as you can get with a schedule, is that we don't have to start lunch at 9 o'clock in the morning, which by law we actually can't do anyway. Lunch would run from 10:44 and the last lunch shift ends at 12:40. And so lunch would occur during either period 3 or period 7. The Wednesday schedule is blank, not because we don't plan on having school Wednesday, but Wednesday would be, we could possibly run a Falcon schedule that day, or maybe it would be an alternate black gold day as we do right now. We could put our professional development time in that Wednesday slot. So that's why you see Wednesday blank. Moving on to the other category of health and safety. The ventilation I spoke about earlier is in the balcony bathrooms. And those are restrooms that get used frequently because all of the students in lunch are using those spaces. The lower gym and the cafeteria, those are those air exhaust plans that I spoke of. As far as distancing, we know that in certain areas, we can't keep the 3 feet. We can't maintain that. In this room right now, we're 3 feet, and that's measured nose to nose. When you're closer than that, you need to add another layer to mitigate that. So we have a fix. This is what I talked about with Walter, and my camera is off, so I'm hoping people could see this. These are going to be L dividers to use in computer rooms, art rooms, areas where we can't keep students 3 feet apart because of class size. Students also have the option of wearing face shields, and I didn't have one close to me, but they're in the back. So we would look at that, and I listed a couple of those areas that we have to pay attention to, like our writing center, the art classroom, some computer-based classes. We know in semester 1, we have 23 classes where the enrollment in all in, they cannot fit safely in the room that they're at. So we would have to move those classes. And they'd have to be moved to another room. This is something we spoke to Doug Hartline about, and it would involve shared spaces, which isn't preferable. If you're in your classroom using your computer and your technology, and then you leave and another teacher comes in, another group. But that's something we would have to do. And then music courses was just another health and safety consideration. What Appendix 7 of the Connecticut reopening plan is telling us is that it's required that if you have 30 minutes of singing or playing instruments, you then leave that space for 20 minutes in order to let the HVAC system dilute the air, and then you could return to that space. So our solution to that is to use the auditorium as that extra space. It works very well. It's right there next to our music classrooms. All of this is all like a domino, because if we use the music and we use the auditorium, we can't have study hall in the auditorium. And that is a big place right now for study hall. So therefore, we'd have to move study halls into classroom spaces, which would then necessitate the need for monitors, because if the teachers are in study halls or monitors are in study, somebody's got to watch the hallways. And so it's a little bit of a domino when we're looking at the health and safety and what we can do. When we look at facilities, we've learned so much from being in school for these 6 weeks. One of the things we've learned is that it takes 12 minutes to clean the lunch tables between lunch shifts. If we have an all-in with those 4 lunch waves, we're looking at 6, our schedule allows for 6 minutes between classes. I guess there's a couple of ways to solve that, right? We could make 12 minutes between the shifts, but then that's taking the academic time from the other classes. So our suggestion that you saw earlier was the extra custodial position, which we believe would work to give us that clean of the tables in the 6 minutes. We spoke about, when we were first doing our presentation back in August, replacing some tables with desks, and that has been done. We did invest quite a bit in furniture. It was a good investment because unlike, these barriers, we'll actually use the desks again and again. And as the Einstein desks or the older desks that are breaking, we have replacements. So we do have those desks. I spoke about moving the 23 classes. That would be for semester 1. And then the face shields or barriers when we can't maintain that 3 feet. We'd start to use the lower gym for a supervision area in the morning. Currently, we can serve 413 students in the upper gym, the cafeteria, and the auditorium in that morning time before school. We'd need some place that could be supervised for the rest of the students who would come in. And so that area could be the lower gym. It would be open for that maximized supervised waiting capacity. The capacity would be less than 15 minutes. Mr. Hartline thought that that was okay in that lower gym. He wouldn't want that many students in there for a long period of time because of the fans and the exhaust, but for a short period of time, that would be okay. So this slide gets back to the safety, and this is transportation. First of all, a tremendous thank you to our parents, our student drivers, the cooperation, the coordination. Drop-off is going very well. This was one of those unknown when we presented our plan and said, this is what we'd like to happen, and how was it going to work? And we had no idea. And it's working very, very well for half the student body at a time. So we have 114 parents that are dropping their students off on Thursday and Friday, Cohort B. Cohort A, it's a little more, it's about 122 on average. We have about 80 students per cohort that are driving to school every day. If all those vehicles come on campus at the same time, we are concerned about meeting those safety needs. And that's where we talk about that extra supervision. So if the student drivers are going to exit their cars, right now they are parking just in one lot, in the upper lot. In an all-in situation, we know our students are going to be in the junior parking lot, that lower parking lot, and there's a bus that brings them back up to the school. So we start to supervise those areas beginning at 7 a.m., and I listed them there for you. Students proceed to their first period class at 7:25. We did have an experience where we did not have our SRO. Right now, Officer Signor is in the road at Barlow Drive and Route 58 in the morning. There was a day he was not here, and you could feel it. And it was the traffic backed up into 58, which is something we don't want to happen. We are a little concerned with all the cars coming onto campus. Do we start to open up Turney Road and have people enter Turney Road to drop off students? I have many degrees. Traffic control is not one of them. So I have been in contact with the police departments. We'll continue to work on how do we bring everyone safely in and get them safely out. We have to avoid that bottleneck of cars turning in two different directions as they're going out. So one of the ways the Reading Police have solved this for us with open house, when we used to do open house in person, is they would make Barlow Drive one way and then have all the parents come in and out, and that would really be a police decision, but it's a consideration that we have to think about when we're going all in. Our food service, we have our 4 lunch waves in 2 different locations. So we're dividing students between 10:44 and 12:40, 6 minutes in between lunch waves. You could see the space limits in the upper gym and in the cafeteria. At the moment, we're using the tent outside. It's a senior privilege. The seniors are doing an amazing job just following the rules and enjoying that outdoor time. I think they'll have another few weeks of it. We're supposed to get a little warmer weather, but we need to make sure that in rain or snow, or that we have enough seats for every student. And in this model, we would be able to feed them all. However, it would mean that we have to have other staff members to supervise locations, and looking at those lunch shifts in 4 waves in 2 locations, having something that we've never really had at Barlow, those lunch supervisors or lunch monitors. And then we look at academics. So one of the questions we ask ourselves is, will there be more students in Cohort C in an all-in model? It's an unknown variable. We can ask for feedback, but we don't know what parents and students will do when they're looking at that. Right now, we don't have a tremendous number of students in Cohort C. We have about 50 students in Cohort C at the moment. So the technology we don't believe will be an issue. At first we thought, well, if they're all in, will we have enough technology to support students in their classes? There was a technology survey that was done, and so far more than 90% of students said they do have technology they could bring to school. And so that would be important, and we know that we have some MacBook or Chromebooks that will be delivered to the school. That will help as well. When we're looking at instructional time, this is an unknown for me, because I could think that the drop-off is going to work like it's working now. Most days, most of the students get to class on time. There are some days when a parent stops in the wrong place, or a bus is late and it slows everyone down. Any of you who are dropping students off, sometimes those students are arriving late to class. The schedule that we built would allow us to maybe cut into advisory time more, so that we can make sure we're preserving those academic minutes that are just so important to students. The lunch changes, will we be able to get them in and out swiftly? That's one of those, we think we have a plan. We have to see and how it goes. We know that it may not be possible to address the full scope and sequence of the traditional curriculum. We've spent September kind of in our slower start as parents and students are recognizing now things are ramping up. You heard Max talk about tests are increasing and the academics are increasing, but that's something that we know we will continue to use our professional development time to lessen that impact and to make those curricular conversations that we need to do. It really amounts to prioritizing the priority standards that and the work that Dr. Pearson-Ugal has been leading us in these past few years. Our neighboring schools have recognized that need to move. They were all in, and then they needed to move all out because of different situations in the school. So that reduces the in-person learning time. Just another consideration to look at. When we look at those neighboring schools, in Durg A, the schools and the principals I'm in contact with, there's a decision to remain in hybrid and to reassess that at the end of the quarter or at the end of a semester, except for Darien and New Canaan. Darien is back in full, and New Canaan came in and they brought the grades in one at a time. So they brought the seniors in first and they kind of did that. You could see the schools that are still in hybrid. New Fairfield, though they're all in, they're currently all out. They're shut down. So they're all in distance learning. And then Newtown was the town I mentioned before that they don't have a way to feed their students. So they've got an interesting solution where they're all in for half the day. And then the students are going home for lunch and then they're distance learning the last period. That's similar to what Weston is doing where students are in person, then they're home for lunch and then they come back. So there's some creative things we can do with our schedule. But rest assured, we all believe the best place for students, as Dr. Harrison started this presentation, is in school with their teachers. In fact, many teachers acknowledge it's much easier if they didn't have a Monday, Tuesday cohort and a Thursday, Friday cohort, if all the students were there. We don't want to compromise student safety in order to have that ease of students being there. And we'll always have a Cohort C, so there'll always be a need to keep that streaming going. And that leads us to the final slide, which is the steps and the timing in this process. So step one, and really we don't move forward until we have step one, which is that close collaboration with the Department of Public Health and the medical health advisors regarding that feasibility of an all-in model. And then when we get that go ahead, step two is when the Department of Public Health and mental health advisors confirm a safe all-in, then the timeline of the return will take into consideration that natural semester break. So I put this in here because some of our Department of Health conversations have talked about, as Dr. Harrison alluded to, this possible uptick, especially around the holidays. So if there was a staying in hybrid, and then after the holidays in January 3rd or January 4th, the health official said, hey, you know what? You can go all in. The amount of changing of student schedules, we may want to consider waiting until that natural semester break, especially when you're looking at the classes that would need to be moved. What we would be doing now is the same metrics and the work that we've done with semester one classes, with those 23 classes that would need to be moved. We would look at semester two, and that would be the work we'll be undertaking in these next weeks to see what is the enrollment of those classes, what classes where we can move the entire teacher's schedule to a different room. The room we're in right now may become a classroom. And some of those smaller areas. But the teacher would start the second semester in this room, whether we were in hybrid or not, so that they would then be ready for a February 4th, okay, we're going to go all in once these other considerations are there. So I threw in that natural semester break because it seemed like a logical time frame to go with, but knowing that the decision is really with the health department, with Dr. Harrison and with the board. And that is the end of the presentation that I have, but I would be happy to take any questions that you might have.
All right, so at this time, I'll open it up for board members for any questions.
Wow,
have-
that was a
have
lot.
Yeah.
That was a lot. What percentage of students are just learning from home right now?
So there are 59 at the moment, 59 students.
Students, okay.
59. Yeah, sorry, with the mask, it's a little difficult.
No worries. So the bulk of the students are back in hybrid, one way or the other, okay.
Correct. There's 367 in Cohort A, 353 in Cohort B, and 58 in Cohort D.
So you
And-
said cohort D, we wouldn't want it to exceed cohort A or B.
It
So
would
if
be
more students are opting to
Cohort
come in
C, I
for
thought it
You
was.
wouldn't want it to exceed cohort C.
Cohort C.
cohort C,
Yeah.
and what's the max on cohort C?
Right now,
There's fif-
59 are
Well,
in
that's how many we
Cohort
have
C.
currently, but how many would be the max?
Oh, there is no max to Cohort C, is our
Yeah.
all distance learning cohort. What we're saying is that for space considerations, we have to be careful. It's not a hard, fast rule that if we had 61 students in Cohort D, we would have to have 61 in Cohort C. It's a matter of the Cohort C students are never in the building, and the Cohort D students are always in the building. So when we look at numbers in feeding students or study halls or spaces physically in classes, we just have to keep an eye on how big Cohort D gets.
All right, so, but you're saying there's no maximum. So if more people, if we're not going to go to out of hybrid until February, and more people want to opt into cohort D, we don't have a number threshold there to say, once we hit 100 people, we're not taking anybody else into cohort D.
Cohort C has no threshold. Cohort D, we have to be careful that it stays basically with the Cohort C. If it doesn't, then we might have a problem fitting students in lunch. And I'm sorry, I am speaking so slowly because the echo in my head is making me kooky.
So are there requirements to be in cohort D?
Right.
Yes.
Okay,
So we have a process in order for students to be in Cohort D. And it involves, if you're familiar with our process right now, in something called an administrative review. So we have some students that have asked to be in Cohort D because they have more friends in their other cohort. We're more likely to say no, make new friends, find new people to eat with. But whatever you did, Todd, I'm not echoing anymore. Thank you. So we will take learning needs, that would be a priority. Technology needs, as I said. There are some things that students can try academically before they say, no, I must be in every day. So that process is through an administrative review, which is usually started by the school counselors. And that's where we're at right now.
how long does that take?
Oh, it's a matter of a day to have the meeting, but then we need about 2 days, 2 school days to make sure that the desks are in place in the classroom, because some of our teachers, if they know they only have 16 students in cohort A, they only have 16 desks. So the 17th student just can't walk in on a Thursday and say, I'm here. We need some time to let the teachers know. That's where, Todd, we need to keep such a close eye on cohort D to make sure we're not overloading lunch waves. We only have a limited number of seats. We've got some creative ways to do that if cohort D starts to creep up very high. But right now, the cohorts are about even with C and D.
So what about staying in the hybrid model? And I'm just thinking of something that Dr. Harrison had said at the beginning about increasing the density in the school and looking at an inevitable shutdown sooner rather than later. If you were to stay in the hybrid model and the density is lower, would you be looking at being able to maintain the hybrid model instead of going to full distance learning?
That's what's been recommended to us, is to stay with what's working right now, which is the hybrid model. But that is not my decision solely to make. I can just give you the information of what needs to be in place in order to feel comfortable going to an all-in model.
So just so I'm clear, so right now, based on that last page of the presentation, we're staying in hybrid until February 1st unless we make a different decision.
I would leave that to Dr. Harrison.
I just want to be clear for the board members and the public what we're talking about here, because we said we'd look at a November to check in again, and it looks like here on this last page we're saying we'll be here till February 1st in hybrid.
Well,
I think the February 1st date is helpful to keep in mind, because that's when there's this natural break. Because that was some of the discussion that we had, when there's a natural break in the semester or the calendar. But I don't think there's anything hard and fast about that. I mean, this is given that we would like to bring students back in. I mean, this is something that we'll continue to monitor. Of course, you know, I'm not going to send an email to all high school parents and say we're all in starting tomorrow, right? To make sure that we have notice leading up to that point. But it's the kind of thing that we want to constantly monitor, and also really watching what's happening around us as well.
Okay, so I just want to gain a little clarity here, because what I feel is most important for our students and our parents, obviously safety is priority one, but once we move past that, I think we need to have a consistent message, something that people can start to kind of feel confident in. And it seems to me like every time we have another presentation, things change again. And believe me, I understand that we're in an evolving world with situations, but I don't know that it's helpful if we say we're going all in on October 4th, and then the week before we say, okay, wait a minute, we don't think we can go all in. We don't really have that ability, but we're going to need another month or so, and then we're going all in. And then we come back and we say, well, we couldn't really do that either. At some point, we need to really figure out what are our abilities, okay? And what do we feel comfortable with? Are all of our students in environments where they're always 3 feet apart, or is there situations where they're not 3 feet apart? And what is that frequency? And what is our recommendation for, you know, adding more students to the fact, you know? So what I'm trying to wrap my head around is exactly what is it? Obviously, we're all saying we'd love to be all in, okay? But I think the next question that you really have to answer is, what can we do? Okay? And I know we could say, well, we really don't know that because everything's changing, but we pretty much know. Unless there's a vaccine or some sort of a medical miracle, we know that the recommendation is not going to change, that we should be 3 feet apart, that we should be masked, that we should be. And so it seems to me that we could figure out exactly what our capabilities are, you know, what our capacity is. And then we need to clearly articulate that and say, this is what, you know, we want to do. And I made some notes, and I'm trying to understand, how much do we factor into our decision the preferences of the students, staff, and the parents? Is that part of our decision-making process? Is it 10%? Is it 20%? Is it 50%? Because if it's not really part of our decision-making process, then I would wonder whether we should be spending more time figuring out what it is we can do and less time figuring out what everybody wants to do. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't care what people want to do. Obviously, we're here. We want to hear from parents. We want to hear from students as to, what your preferences are, because, you are our consumers and we serve you. But I'm just looking at, moving forward, how do we get to a place where we can give some sort of an opinion with some sort of an assertive opinion that we could say, this is what we want to do? Because I have to tell you, and again, I don't want to seem overly skeptical, but when we're talking about, gee, maybe we're going to go all in on February 1st, my hair wants to explode, because everything that I've heard is that colleges, everybody, they're letting kids out in February because they're saying that is the height of the flu season. That is the time when, if we are going to have a severe second wave, that is the time when it's scheduled to hit. So I don't know that it is helpful to say we're all in maybe on February 1st. I would, and again, I know that everyone is working really hard at this, and I know that we're, this is a challenging situation, but I just think we should work to try to establish those guidelines and as far as our capacity and what we're doing moving forward as soon as we can, because I think that's what parents are looking for, and that's the guidance that everyone is seeking. That's just my opinion.
So I'm sorry if that wasn't clear.
I agree. I think a lot of switching around is very hard on everybody. You're just getting used to a routine. I think one of the things that really concerned me over the summer was that we had this theory that we were going back. And so we were not putting as much planning into the virtual learning platforms as maybe we otherwise could have directed our attention to. And I think, when we're going to have these PD days for the teachers, that's a real focus for them, and that really building that up and making us really good at virtual teaching could be a huge asset coming forward if we maybe need to switch back to that, or that we're going to maintain the hybrid model.
Could I just ask somebody needs, there's a lot of background noise from some kids in the background. Anyway, the other question I wanted to ask you, Gina, is what about the Wednesday? That's the half PE day, half all in, half, the students are in. If we stay hybrid, is there an alternate model where the Wednesday could be an alternating all in all day for a group, and then it switches the next week to, instead of a half day, which is, especially when they're just doing a Falcon day schedule, they're getting a short day anyway. It almost seems like, I'm not there experiencing it. I don't really know, but it just doesn't seem like you would be getting that much of anything in a half day in that kind of a schedule.
So we can look at all of those schedule options. What I presented for that black and gold schedule, a Falcon day on Wednesdays, we could get very creative with the schedule. I think it is, we know we're using Wednesdays at the moment for those PD times. It seems to be a nice break in the week for the students. And it gives us the opportunity to see them right now as we're bringing in the different cohorts. But we can certainly look at what that schedule might look like on a Wednesday in bringing students in. I think what I wanted to stress in relation to Mike's point is that February 1st was not to say, oh, on February 1st, we'll magically come back in. It was just to say that is a good break when you look at the amount of shifting that we would need to do in class sizes, in courses that students are taking. When we looked at some of our computer rooms, one in particular, Mr. Hartline had some concerns about ever using that room to capacity. unless we could spread out computers in that area. So I feel like I am torn between, I want every student back in this school. They're the life of the school. There is no doubt in my mind that that's where I'd like us to be. There are some challenges and some considerations that we need to take, and we know what they are, and we can take them. But it's the Department of Health and our medical experts that are advising us of what is that timeline. And I don't think it's my timeline. I don't think it's the parents' timeline. I think it is their medical input and their conversations with Dr. Harrison and Dr. Pearson-Ugal to find out when that is the best time. A big consideration that we knew going into this is that inability to cohort a high school. It's what makes the K-8s, even in our surrounding towns, where a K-8 could go in person, but a high school might not be able to.
Right, but we haven't been in cohort, I mean,
We
since we
call them
started.
cohort.
Yeah,
We've never
been
been
in
in
cohort, so.
Exactly, right.
I have two questions. One
Sure.
is, if we do go all in, whenever that may be, which it's clear, it was clear to me that it's not definitive in the presentation, so that
Thank
was
you.
clear to me. But in terms of if we do go all in at some point, will families still be given a choice to stay hybrid? Or is it kind of an all or nothing proposition?
I think what we'd have to be careful of is to explain what families are choosing. So if they were still going to send their students in hybrid, their students are still being exposed to all of the
Yeah.
students.
Yeah.
I believe at the K-8s, they did give that choice of, do I want to stay Monday and Tuesday and stay in that hybrid, as long as they understand that it's not truly with those 16 students, it's with all 28 or 30 or however many are in that class. And then Cohort C can stay for as long as they want to in that temporary learning from home.
Right, but we have cohort D that has 58 kids that are crossing between cohort A and B.
Right, at this point.
Right.
And then another follow-up question was with respect to the costs that were outlined earlier.
right.
I think that there were the one-time, I guess, more capital expenditure costs, about $330,000, and these other costs of $69,000. Are those all or nothing as well? Are those optimal costs that we need to spend in order to get all kids back in the classroom? Or is it, if we can spend some of it but not all of it, we feel like the health director will say it's safe for our students to be back on the building?
Right, so it's more of the second option. We don't need to do the full HVAC replacement in the cafeteria or the lower gym in order to have all the students back. But we would need the exhaust fans in the lower gym, and we would need the fans in the windows of the cafeteria. We would need the fans in the restrooms.
And how much time, how much time would it take to make all those adjustments?
I don't know that it would be a tremendous amount of time. It's something Walter is working on right now in getting those prices and those pieces of equipment. So I don't have an exact number for you of time it would take.
Are the
So
vents in the
Dr. Harrison-
cafeteria?
No, go ahead, sorry. Go ahead, Karen.
I was just asking, are the vents in the cafeteria? I thought those were those big tubes that we saw coming out of the windows.
And that unit we were renting at
Oh,
a tremendous
okay.
cost, but we were renting it.
Oh,
It was an
okay.
air conditioning unit. That's gone now. It just was
Oh.
taken out. And now we're looking at what will replace it.
So on page 5, where you have the costs of the various items, how many of those items do you need us to approve so people can start doing work on those to get more people into the building? You mentioned the HVAC for 150,000. We don't necessarily
No,
need to
we're not.
approve that.
No.
But of these other items, like an extra custodian, do we need to start hiring? Monitors, divider, we need to buy those and get those installed. So I'm looking at how many items off the list we need to purchase here, and being able to start those items.
Right. So we are going ahead with the dividers. I don't know, I know Walter has been in touch with Mr. Rice and about those expenses. So that's something I would like to do because those dividers need some labor. It's some internal labor to cut those. It's not a tremendous amount of money. We are moving ahead with the bathroom exhaust and the cafeteria and the lower gym exhaust. We have not addressed how we're going to deal with the safety, and we have not addressed the custodian. We haven't posted anything for that position. We have not posted anything for monitors.
Is this an additional custodian on top of the additional custodian?
We have on-call. I see Walter appeared on my screen, so maybe he could respond directly to that. It's great that you just appear, Walter.
You got to unmute him maybe, Todd. Oh, no,
Nope,
he's good.
Good evening. We currently have an on-call custodian, part-time, that we're using. But if you remember, we did lose a full-time custodian a couple of years back. And in order to try and keep up with everything that we're doing now, having the additional lunch waves and everything else, we will need a full-time custodian back in to handle that. So right now, the custodian we have is a temporary. It was approved for, I believe, 90 days, Gina.
Correct.
So we will need something to go beyond that.
Okay, so we're talking about the extending the same custodian or the same type of arrangement with a custodian.
We're talking about adding a position to help clean those lunch waves, because what we've learned is that we can't do that if we were going to go all in.
I understand completely. My
Okay.
question is, we had talked about needing greater coverage for the custodial staff. And so currently we have an on-call person. Now, I think we had this discussion the beginning of the school year, and the board was in favor of I think Scott had asked, and we were approved an additional custodian to help with that. My question was simply, do we need another custodian on top
Yes.
of that custodian?
Yes, we
Or are
do.
we talking about extending that current custodian's tenure to the full year and another one on top of that? Is that clear?
We're
from a-
talking,
If I can just clarify, from a dollar standpoint, it's difficult for me to tell if you can hear me or not. Is that-
Sure, I can hear you, so, Scott, yeah.
From a dollar standpoint, it's extending the one that was already approved previously. In the
Okay,
summer, when we looked at the budget, we had costed out staff at a 90-day total, not knowing if it would be shorter or longer. As Walter and Gina have both mentioned, they're using the part-time on-call person. That's eating into the existing 90-day period. I think what Gina is suggesting is to extend that 90-day period to effectively a 180-day period. So whether it's the same individual or a different individual, from a dollar standpoint, it's what we did before again.
right. So it's the position, and would we be looking to hire a full-time staff member with benefits and everything? Or would we be looking to continue the model of an on-call, but extending it for the full year?
so let me back up, because we do need an extra custodian to clean the lunch areas. It's not just about extending the custodian that's there, although we'd have to have that person continue. It's about adding another person if we're going to get those areas clean in the time we have allotted.
So it's 2 custodians.
Correct.
And they would both be on-call custodians, or would be looking to hire someone full-time?
I think we could work that out in whatever Walter is seeing. I think we're looking to get a person there that's consistent. I don't know how deep his on-call pool is. Is it better to get that position back of a custodian that's working from 10 to 6:30?
I thought it was only for the lunch period. So
Right.
during the day, why would it have to extend to 6:30?
What we were anticipating, Karen, is that there would be more cleaning involved with more people in the building. So we might need to clean restrooms beginning at 10 or throughout the day, and then do more cleanup because more people would be using the building in an all-in.
Okay, so just so that we're all clear, this second custodian would only be necessary in an all-in model.
Correct.
So it probably would not make sense to hire someone now until you go all in.
Correct. The
And this,
monitors too.
and what?
The monitors, it wouldn't make sense to hire
the two
two
monitors.
monitors
Yeah, why pay them now if they're not
unless
going to go
and
till February?
until we're all in.
So
Okay.
I think the 16,500 that's on here would cover this second, for lack of a better phrase, second extra custodian. And the first extra custodian that we currently have, we've funded for half the school year. So we would need to revisit that separately. As far as moving money around, is that right? Okay.
That sounds correct.
And this 16,500 we think would cover a second person for another rest. That doesn't seem like very long if they're working 10 to 6:30.
No, it wouldn't be 10 to 6.
It would only be a couple months.
The second semester.
For the
We
whole
just
second
looked at a
semester.
semester, a 90-day.
Okay, so, thank you. I just want to make sure so it looks to me, based on looking at these things, minus the extra police and minus the big capital project for HVAC, which we're going to do next summer, we would need about $70,000 to get moved around to cover extra monitors, an additional custodian, and everything else on this list besides those
When would
two
you need
big
to
ticket
make
items.
decisions on that by?
Yeah.
If we were going to go all in, when would that have to be decided?
I don't think you do. I think those decisions could be made when we make that decision to go all in.
No, but some of these have to be done, like the desk dividers, right? I mean,
Right.
Well,
vans and some of that work's got to happen before we make the decision. Where custodian and hallway monitors, we can wait until we know the day that we're actually going in and then hire those people, hopefully a couple of weeks in advance. But some of the other stuff is going to take time to do the construction work, right?
well,
You're going to have some expenditures whether or not you go all in. You're going to have to make them even if you don't go.
Well-
Yeah, maybe we
Correct.
should differentiate the things that for instance, the bathroom fans we want to do even if we stay hybrid, right? I mean,
Correct.
well,
so those things I think we want to just get lined up and get going.
Right.
And then
yes,
the
yes.
second-
Again, I'd like to understand, because I thought we were doing all the bathroom fans. I thought we had discussed that in the beginning of the school year, and we were doing the bathroom fans. So obviously, it's a lot of work, and it's time demand on Walter.
Right.
I'm just wondering, so we didn't factor in any of that expense for those fans, and those bathrooms don't have fans.
He's
And-
waving,
and
Walter
price-
wants to
Well,
answer.
go ahead, Walter. Sorry.
Go ahead.
So the bathrooms that are in question, they have supply fans, minimum amount of air in. It's not an ideal situation. And talking with the health department, we should have exhaust in those. We went through and made sure that every fan in every bathroom is operating in the manner which it was designed. These particular bathrooms are older bathrooms. It's a poor design. We're not exhausting out. So yes, the fans in there are functioning as designed, but they don't function for our needs. There's a big difference. Those fans should have exhaust out ideally. And that, so it's not that work wasn't done to get all the fans going. They just, basically it runs the wrong way for us in those particular bathrooms.
So it
That
does
would
look
be
like it's
clarification.
30,000 in fans, right? 9,000 for the bathroom, 1,000 for the cafeteria, and 20,000 for the lower gym. So 30,000 additional for fans. We need to put those in anyway,
Correct.
no matter what model we're in, unless we're all not in the building.
Right, because who knows what next year's gonna be anyway, so.
Well,
So I guess what's your, or do you have you think we funded this already, or? I
well,
guess,
no, I guess what I'm trying to determine here is that the cafeteria fans and all this stuff, this is a temporary fix for this year, right?
The cafeteria fans would be, not the gymnasium fans, the exhaust fans in there. I spoke to the fire marshal on those. Those would be a permanent fixture.
okay, so.
Right, but
$1,000 for the cafeteria fan, knowing that we're doing the HVAC project over the
Well,
summer, the capital. So
yeah.
$1,000 for the cafeteria fan.
That's fine.
yeah, I'm just looking at I'm looking at avoiding redundancy, if that makes sense to you. I don't, obviously we want to do what's necessary, but you know, we're going to do a major project this summer. You know, how much does it cost to put the fans in, and would they be part of the new system, or, you know, how would that work? I just don't want to do, you know, have any redundancy. That's the only thing I'm
Right, but it's
looking
only
for.
$1,000 for the cafeteria fans.
No, it's fine. The other question that I had that I know that Scott's going to give a report later on, but I'd really like to know where we stand as far as budget. Do we have flexibility that we can allocate $70K to handle some of these issues? Or are we running in arrears already? Because I think that would affect our decision-making process as well.
All right, well, Scott's looking at the numbers there to see if you can give us an update on that. Are there other questions the board members have?
I just have one more about if we go all in light of the fact that numbers in Connecticut and all the surrounding states are going up now, does it seem like it's really going to happen is what I'm asking. Does it seem like it's a viable situation, you know?
So Karen, one of the things that I wanted to be sure of is, as we're having this conversation, that we're not just using this time to kick the can down the road, right? But that we're having some realistic discussions about what is really the likeliness of this happening. And I think that's really where the challenge is, right? Because so much of it is health data determined. If you asked me the same question last week, you know, before having 3 cases in the district today and learning that a neighboring district has closed, they've gone completely to remote learning as of just a few hours ago, I would have been a lot more
Optimistic.
optimistic, exactly. And so, you know, so we're looking at, Gina shared, here are some of the challenges, but none of these are challenges that we can't overcome. And so I'm really struggling to be able to project sort of what things look like moving forward. And then again, you know, as I mentioned at the beginning, just hearing from the health directors, you know, that was conversations that we had yesterday, which were already different than conversations we had maybe last week. So, you know, that's not a very simple, easy answer to the question. But just kind of, I'm just trying to capture all of what makes the decision-making so hard.
Yeah, no, I know it changes by the day. That's why I'm wondering, are we trying to make something work that is inevitably not going to work?
Well, and so one of the things that was beneficial to get one of the benefits of having the survey information is to really get a picture from our students and our families as to, is this working from an educational standpoint? So if we're in the business of teaching and learning, then we want to see, nothing is going to replace face-to-face learning for our students, but are students continuing to make progress? Are they still learning in this environment? And so, you know, that was one of the benefits of, you know, pulling in some of that qualitative information and being able to consider that when weighing all of these other pieces out as well. You know, I think that there was a period where, in projecting into the future and thinking it is likely that we'll be remote, you know, if I were to say it's likely that we'll be remote, you know, moving into December and January. So let's hurry up, and if we're going to get them in, let's do it quickly now. And I think that what we're seeing is some of those timelines shifting very quickly.
Listen, if this is clearly a tough decision and it changes every day, but if what we're looking for is just clarity in terms of what we're going to do, then it sounds like, I mean, if you just look at what the health directors are saying, what the health professionals are saying, the 3 cases we have in the district, the changes around us in the county, it sounds like that while there is no consensus, the majority is saying that it's probably better to stick with what we're doing. I mean, to Mike's point about, do we factor in parents, students' opinions, or do we rely on the health professionals more than anything else? I mean, I think even if you take all of those resources, opinions in mind, the majority is saying we should keep the status quo, but it's not to say that we can't communicate publicly that, as we've been doing, is to monitor this every month. We have a board meeting every month. We can continue to provide a board meeting every month, and we've already communicated that what we need from a resource perspective, what $38,000 or $70,000 in the short term, you know, the board can, if as it needs to, if we need to approve the funds, then we can do that at our monthly meeting. And then we can still maintain that clear communication, status quo, let's keep going, but we're going to provide periodic updates as the cases change. And maybe that's the message. I don't know.
I guess the question I would also have, you know, 1/3 of the people said that students and parents would want to be in full-time. So is that an option if they want to go to Cohort D?
But did they come to that opinion, Todd, before or after there were cases in the district? And before or after, I don't know the timing on that survey. And I guess that would be my question to Gina, kind of. What was the timing?
Or just what's the process going to be if people are saying, you know, if we're saying we're going to stay in hybrid and people do want to come in and we have a cohort that allows that, are we going to allow that or not? I mean, we just need to be clear with
until we run out of room for it. And in answer to your question, Maureen, the survey was before. Those cases are just coming forward today.
Right.
So the survey was last week.
So to me, that the information in that survey, while relevant, is dated. And it's dated because things in this context change so frequently, right? If you were to ask the parents, send out an instantaneous survey, you're definitely going to get some level of knee-jerk reaction that says, oh my gosh, a case in the district? No. You know,
right, but we're
I
also
think
going
we
to have
are
some
always
parents that
dealing
do
with a
want to
moving
come in.
target.
Yeah,
I'm
and
sorry.
we're always going to have some parents that are going to want to come in, and we just need to be clear about what's our position on allowing that to happen or not.
We have to accept the fact that we are going to make someone unhappy.
And it
Wear
has
the
to be
hat.
fair.
It
Right.
has to be fair, no doubt, but we're not going to make everyone happy here. We're just not. We can't try.
Right. That's true. But when we say we have to be fair, that's where it gets challenging, because when you have a certain number of available spots for all in order to be able to accommodate your 2 cohorts, what's the determining factor as to how many you let in and who you let in and how you go about that? That's where, you know, it gets, obviously.
But that also allows for the tipping point of things to evolve, right? Because by virtue of a person asking to be part of that cohort, they're going to be nuanced at the time they ask.
Yes.
What other items in here have a lead time that we need to look at? So again, you know, I'm not sure when we're saying we're going to make the decision to go back in, but when we make that decision, are there things here, like scheduling seems like it's something we can figure out, but it will take us time to implement it. So again, the semester change makes sense to probably do that because that's the least disruptive for everybody.
Correct.
But are there other items on here that are longer term? And we've talked about some of the building things that need to happen now.
Mhm.
Are there other items that are kind of
I would,
term?
I would want to see Walter and his crew working on these dividers because it's $8,000, but it's something that's more labor intensive, and I want to have them ready for when we could be all in. The only other piece that's beyond my scope is that conversation with the Reading Police in how will we monitor the safety on the roads. I know that I am not permitted to put my security people on the roads directing traffic, but then we need to have those conversations. And I think that that's beyond my level of how can we monitor that traffic so that we're ready to go, like we were ready to go with the hybrid situation in how we were going to bring parents in. We've organized it from the school standpoint. So more signs, we would drop off parents all around the loop. Parents would be stopping. We'd have both doors open. We've done that kind of planning. The piece that eludes me is how, if we have one resource officer, one police officer at Route 58, how do I cover Turney Drive with the student drivers? And so that's something that we could be talking about and having some brainstorming. I agree with what's been said before, holding off on the custodian and the monitors until we know what that time frame is. We will work right now, given this conversation, with semester 2 and what classes, so I can update you again in November or December meeting that talks about what classrooms we've exceeded capacity and we've had to move around. So we can start in February with those teachers in the classrooms they need to be in to accommodate all in. Whether we're all in February or not, we would be ready to go. And then I think we'd be in a position where it's easier to say, now the health data, we're being advised we could go all in. And then it should be easier to make those transitions. That would be my suggestion.
So where would we need a police officer on Turney Road? Because the reason we need a police officer on Black Rock Turnpike is because it's a main thoroughfare. You have cars coming, at high speeds, and you have congestion. Turney Road goes all the way down until it hits Meeker Hill. It could back up on Turney Road. You really need security personnel that can be on school property. One could be in the parking lot. One could be, directing them, into the circle. But you really don't need a police officer on Turney Road, do you?
No, I don't think that's our decision though, right? That's the Reading Police Department.
No. It's their decision if we want to put somebody on a public road. What I'm suggesting is that we could have one of our security staff in our parking lot is really what we need as far as traffic control. We don't need another police officer standing on Turney Road.
But do we have enough bodies for that to have everybody strategically? Because I'm also thinking in dropping off, you come up from 58 and there are still parents who are sneaking in from Turney so they could cut the line.
Correct.
And then they come in and they try to cut you off. And eventually there's going to be an argument between parents with that kind of thing. So I'm just wondering, Gina, if you feel like you have enough people to have somebody at the Barlow Drive and Turney. You're going to need to have a couple of somebodies on the senior lot. If you open up junior lot again.
Right.
So do we we've only got one Pearl, one Bruce.
Yeah.
One.
All right, so I don't think we have to solve that problem tonight.
No,
but we
I'm
need to
just
look
saying
at
it's
how
a
we deal
different
with it.
discussion if
Yeah.
a police officer is much different than hiring a couple of security guards to cover that. dilemma for us, you know.
Yep.
I think we could do that easily.
So I guess my question, just to be clear for the public, so our next decision point we had talked about in the previous meeting, I think it was November at the marking period or somewhere around in there, because we don't have the extra PD days on Wednesdays approved past the end of October. So, you know, just again for, you know, we don't have another board meeting, regular meeting until, you know, late in November. So is it safe to say basically we're staying in hybrid at least through November until we make a decision then? And potentially it will go out further. And just so I don't want parents to leave this meeting going, I don't know what we're planning to do here.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. That's a good point.
Because it sounds like, you know, we're staying in hybrid. We have the Wednesday half days that we've done, you know, PD or extra technology training through next Wednesday. So that's something we would have to look about on November, the Wednesday schedule and what we're doing with that day. And then if really we're saying we're not going in all in, don't even think about that in November, then we need to, you know, be clear about that, because there's some stuff here on this list that needs to be done, and I don't think we're going to have it done before, you know, November, based on just, you know, we have to buy stuff and construct some stuff and hire some people. So
It's correct. I think there's also a benefit for the teachers and the parents, and especially the students, to know that there's a consistency. We're not going to be saying in November, we're going to go all in November. So if there was, which is why I picked that semester break, as we wouldn't go all in before the semester changes. We'd consider going all in after the semester changes if we have all the health data. And by that point, we would be able to rearrange student schedules. I think it would be terribly disruptive to students right now to rearrange schedules, physical layout of the school, changing those classrooms, sharing spaces, and doing that kind of work now, which is why I'm advocating to not go all in before the semester break. And given what the health people are talking about with us in looking at that data over the holidays and that inevitability of cases going up, it's something to.
and again, they have items on this list that they're looking for us to do as well, plus the health data. So I guess my question would be then, you know, for November going forward, are we looking at any changes in the hybrid model of the Wednesday date? Are we looking for additional, you know, teacher instructional time, half days? What's going to happen with the Wednesday?
Mm-hmm.
You know, to keep moving forward in this model so the kids are getting what they need.
So in the administrative report that I'll talk about later on in the meeting, I do talk about those Wednesdays and how we would use additional Wednesdays if they were given to us. It's something the board can definitely consider that the staff would be grateful for, is keeping those Wednesday half-day PD to do the kind of curriculum work that needs to be done now that we've met the technology and we've gone through the safety protocols, heading toward an all-in model, looking at what does that do with our curriculum, with our meeting and closing those learning gaps. We do have internal PD days that we can place, so we could do some of that work, but that would be definitely at the board's discretion. Are there going to be more PD days in November or December?
Could I just ask about the Wednesdays? And I simply ask because I feel like that you were stressing the importance of the in-person learning. And I think that the Wednesday, although I know it's a great opportunity for the PD, it's also a great opportunity for an additional day, a full day of learning. And where it can be alternated, you know, that would be, it's sort of more fair to everybody. And you would also get 3 days of in-person learning per week instead of just 2.5. And I just think that it might be worth looking at, like you said, maybe doing something different with the PD instead of sacrificing that Wednesday. Not sacrificing, but you know what I mean? Like giving that opportunity to the students.
So I hate it when I'm forced to be put in a role to try and play an
We
educator.
can't hear you, Mike.
Oh, sorry. You're not live here, so I'm sorry. I keep muting myself. I'm uncomfortable being put in a role to, where I try to play an educator. I sit on the board, but I am not an educator. But I am still struggling with the recommendations. That's what I really think is what we need. Ultimately, we've gone through this a couple of times. This is the superintendent's reopening plan. So the superintendent has full discretion over when or if to change the plan. And the board has, and the state has given him that ability. But so what's happening to me is that we're talking about a lot of what ifs and stuff like that, which is all important. If we are going to go to a full-in model, then we have to have a lot of these answered. But to Todd's point, and to the point I think that most of us are making, is that, and I don't know whether the superintendent is prepared to do that tonight, but I think that at some point, what we really need to hear is that the district does not plan to move to an all-in model at the high school before X date. We will remain in hybrid pending, circumstances relating to the pandemic. Obviously, if we feel the need to close or something, that would be the only reason we would go out of the hybrid. Otherwise, we're in the hybrid. And then again, work towards a date, and as we're working towards that date, working to better determine what our capacity is, so that we can be a little more definitive when we make these statements, because I'm having trouble following everything. And I think that would be really helpful to us moving forward. And because, and I'm going to relate to the Wednesdays. I think when we talked about this, was that a tri-board or was that a regular board meeting? So I might have abstained from a meeting I was at, but it doesn't matter. I thought we had said there was no intention of extending the Wednesdays past what we approved. And again, I'm not, etching it in stone and saying we won't do that. I'm just saying that we need to be clear with our message. We need to make a determination as to what we're going to need moving forward, and have a clear message, a definitive message. I think that's what we really kind of need.
Yeah. I mean, there is a joint board meeting in a week, right? So there is an opportunity if we need to make changes to the calendar to accommodate, that's something we should take up and do with the board. The joint board meeting next week, if we need a joint board decision on calendaring. But I do agree. I mean, if we're basically saying we're not going to do any changes until the semester in February, let's just put that out now. Let's work towards that and make sure we get toward that goal. And if we need to do some construction, let's do that. If we need to make some changes and look at changes in schedules, let's do that. And just, put that date out there and say that's what we're moving towards right now.
So I could make that really clear. So we're not going to look at any changes in making any changes in our instructional model at the high school, at least through the month of November. We'll shoot for that February date as a possible change, and we'll continue to revisit. But going forward, we could be assured that we will remain in this hybrid model. And while we're in this hybrid model, continue making the changes and taking the next steps to be prepared for full in, should the health data open up the door for us to be able to do that.
Okay. No, I think that's.
Well, that's helpful, but I apologize if I seem a little pressing, but you said at least through November, and that leaves December and January before February. So is it at least through November, and we're going to reassess in December, because we're kind of going down the same path is what I'm saying. I'm looking for clear guidance.
Yeah, well, the hard part about the guidance is that you're looking for is that what will come with that, if we're saying that we're not going back until February, then that means that we're not continuing to monitor and look at other options as possibilities. And I just don't think that that's not a decision that I'm prepared to make for that length of time. I mean, I think that we can talk about through the month of November. But I think, from there, I'd like the opportunity for us to see where we are as far as working through this list of things that need to get taken care of. And if there's an opportunity for us to bring some additional students back, even if it's not all full in, but it's more students on campus, I want us to be able to have that flexibility.
Great. No, I appreciate that. It sounds like Dr. Penn is saying that she's not recommending anything before the semester. So I'm seeking clarity, but I understand your position. So we can move forward.
Todd, I would like to circle back on the Wednesdays. So it's just for clarity, are we saying, because we only provided the approval to have the change in PD on Wednesdays through October, right? So the default would be to go back to a normal 5-day schedule in November, right?
Yes, and at that joint tri-board meeting, I did say very clearly that I'm not making a recommendation to move those, continue those half-day Wednesdays into November. We did talk about that. And so I'm standing by not moving forward with that recommendation. I think one of the things with the high school calendar is that there are additional PD days that have not been scheduled in the same way that they have with the other with the K-8 districts. And so that's some of what Dr. Penn will talk about tonight. But as far as making a recommendation to extend those Wednesdays, that is not a recommendation that I'm making.
So Wednesdays, just to be clear, so in November, the Wednesday days are going to change how they look and feel from a schedule, right? So they could become full days rotating with cohort A through the first and second part.
They could also, we would probably look to place our PD days that Dr. Idell was just talking about, at least one of them in November, to get some of those, that student learning outcome work and meet that deadline for that teacher work. So we would look to place those days, and we will bring you a calendar and let you know when those days. If you recall, the high school only has half days. We don't have the full PD days here. So we'll be looking, and actually that's on our agenda tomorrow for the departments to look at what would be the best placement of those days.
Okay, because again, I think it'd be helpful as people get into November in another week or so. Are they going to be half days for the Wednesdays or full days, right? Just to help plan, and for the kids as well, so they know.
Definitely.
Parents. Okay. Other questions from board members? Just looking through all the Zoom windows there. All right, so I guess a final question on this topic, and then we'll move on. Is there anything that requires board approval to move forward on tonight while we have quorum and everyone here? It sounds like, Scott, we may come back to you on the dollars piece of it, but if there's anything that is required right now for a board decision to move forward, either on a spending item or anything else while we have quorum, now would be the time.
In terms of the dollars, I can tell you that, and I can go through more detail later in the evening, but based on everything we've discussed, it's still within the original estimate that was provided in July.
I'm sorry, just to be clear, where we're at right now, or with the additional 70,000?
With the additional items.
Okay. Okay. All right. So if no other comments in on this from administration or board members. All right. So hopefully that was clear to the public, and I'm sure we'll have follow-up communication, so to make sure everybody's all on the same page going forward. Okay, great. Thank you. Then we're going to move on to item 6C, the Diversity and Inclusion Consultant Progress Update. So again, I'll ask either Dr. Harrison or Pearson Ugal for an update there.
I'll take this one. So just wanted to update the board on, I shared at the last meeting that we were working with consultants from the Connecticut Center for School Change. And they had initially given us a proposal of work, and Dr. Pearson Ugal and I met with them and revised the scope of work just based on some additional conversations that we had related to the DEI framework and the work of the Joint Task Force. So there are 5 components to this work. There's leading the work, where they'll convene with the high school DEI committee and assess the equity and social justice efforts that are already happening at the high school. They'll do an audit in conjunction with the staff and collect and review data related to school policies, work with some focus groups of students, do some goal setting around school-related goals related to DEI, and then developing an action plan. One of the things that we focused on, and I shared about this at the last meeting, was that while we are very fortunate to be able to partner with them in this training process, we don't want to be just dependent on working with consultants, indefinitely. And so we talked a lot about the professional learning model, working with our staff to build capacity so that they can continue in the growth after we complete our work with the consultants at the end of the year. And then finally, one of the deliverables is having a plan that will continue beyond this school year. So we had our initial meeting with them. Tomorrow, we're actually meeting with them again, this time bringing in Dr. Penn and her team so that we could really get down to the nitty-gritty of looking at dates, which is why there's some discussion, obviously, around when that professional learning time is, so that we could put those times and dates together.
All right, I'll just open up for discussion. I just have a follow-on question. It would be helpful, I think, for board members if we could understand kind of this, the firm that was hired, how much of their fees, the money that we originally allocated, and the scope of their work and deliverables as you outlined. If we could perhaps get a summary of that, I think would be helpful.
Okay, I have all that.
That would be great. I don't know if we're using the rest of the 70,000 for everything that you talked about there, or if that's a portion of it. But it would just be helpful to
45.
45,
sorry.
Listen, because I
Giving away 70.
Yeah.
I'm in the generous mood tonight.
Thanks.
It would have been in the minutes. Yeah, so no, the 45, the extra 40.
So based on the contract that we received today, it is the cost of this total project is $45,000. And we had talked about some of the curriculum work that had been done already. And that was paid from curriculum funds.
Okay. So yeah, then if we could get, again, just the outline maybe that you put out there, it'd be helpful to have that. Other board members, any other?
Yeah, I just have comments. I know we have an upcoming budget and curriculum committee meeting on the 13th. So to the extent that we're saying we've invested or will commit to 45,000 for long-term efforts, just want to hear, I'd probably suggest that maybe we talk a little bit about more in depth at the curriculum committee meeting, how we expect this work to expand and go into future years, and then what we might need from a resource perspective to keep it going, or maybe it just gets integrated into the learning of our teaching staff and it's part of their PD, but it'd be helpful to understand that. And then what cost we might need, or maybe it's integrated into our normal cost to keep that going. So I'd be interested to just hear about that in terms of just the quality as well as the dollars.
Yeah. So we're going to get that list that you have with the plan and the fees and all that for.
Sure. Yeah. I could send that to you now.
That would be great. I think that'd be very helpful.
Yep. Any other discussion on this topic? I'm looking on the screen as well. Okay. All right, then we'll move on to item D. This is for item D's Director of Finance search update. I was thinking maybe we would table this one, but some board members had asked maybe we just give an update on process. So I don't know if the negotiating committee, I don't think we're at a point that we can make any discussion in public around what's going on. So for any board members that want to have this, otherwise I suggest maybe we table this topic until we have a few more decisions around what's going on in the process. But
I think that would be wise.
I think I just did want to get out there that we are in the process of the boards collectively are in the process of identifying a candidate. So that's kind of pretty much what I just wanted to get out there. There's a process that's being to address that.
Well, no, but if we're going to put, the boards are in the process?
Well, ultimately, the Director of Finance supports all three boards. So I'm just saying whatever that process is that we may not be willing to share at this point, I do want the public to know that we are that there is a process to address that. That's all.
all right, well, I think we'll leave it maybe and just table item before we
I think
we
we're
get
good.
into get into too much detail in public that we're not ready to share yet. So, all right, so I'm going to go ahead and table item D, Director of Finance search update. So we won't have more discussion on that. That concludes everything in the discussion and possible actions. So we'll move on to item 7, administrative reports. And Dr. Harrison or Dr. Penn, I don't know who would like to move us through. We have a few reports here in our packet. I don't know who would like to tee it up and move through those.
So let me take it. I will share with you our administrative report and jump into the professional development that we spoke about. It's such an echo.
Gina, you're muted.
You need to unmute.
Oh, okay. That doesn't really help the echo, but as long as you can hear me, I'll just talk slow, let my voice catch up. So the administrative report, do you think it's mic muting? You got it? There we go. Okay. Nope, still an echo. Okay, so there is the professional development report in our administrative report. And I just gave you a summary of how we have moved through professional development, starting with our protocols for safety and some of our SEL work in September. October has been devoted to more of those technology challenges. And we have focused on Zoom etiquette and also started to delve into the challenges of assessments across platforms. In November, we know we are going to look at formative and summative assessments. We do have to get into that curriculum work and grading students. Oh, that's so much better, whoever just muted, thank you. And we have that focus on school goals and our student learning outcomes. And that will take us through some of our November work. We do recognize that we'll need to move into a future professional development regarding curriculum sequencing. And this is that work I alluded to before about prioritizing the priority standards and looking at where we are with that. Looking at those schedules. So what is the best schedule to meet our students' needs? And I think, Karen, you had mentioned that, looking even at those Wednesday schedule, how are we maximizing our learning time? I see Mike Santangeli here, and I'm going to ask him to jump in. And I also see Mike DeStefano. And as long as Mike DeStefano is feeling okay, he could do the special ed report. But let me go first to the Italian Mike Santangeli. It's great. We've got 2 Italians named Mike. And so, Mr. Santangeli, you are going to speak about athletics. Oh, we've got 3. I'm looking at the 2 on my screen, and then there's Mike D'Agostino right above. I didn't recognize you with your mask on, Mike. Sorry. Okay, Mr. Santangeli.
I think that's enough of an update right there, Gina.
There you go. We're done.
3 Italians named Mike. That's wonderful. just to go over, I just want to start with the fall season. The good news is that we're about 2/3 through the fall season, which in itself is already, a success story. In those, in that time that we've had our seasons, we've already had senior nights for every one of our programs, and that was wonderful. I mean, a little different, but wonderful. We're actually allowing spectators now into our competitions, and we have a sign-up sheet. People have been really good about signing up, showing ID, coming in, social distancing, wearing masks. So we actually have what feels like a normal situation, aside from obviously the mask wearing and whatnot, but we have a little bit of a spirit down at the stadiums, and it really is a nice feel good situation in athletics, which I hope we can continue. Moving forward, the state has come out and told everybody that we're going to be allowed to have somewhat of a postseason. So as typical, we would go into like a league championship process and then a state tournament. What they're going to allow us to do is to stay within our regions, compete within our regions, and have regional champions. So basically we'll be playing the same teams we've already played multiple times, but at least gives each program an additional 3 games. So for example, volleyball that usually has 20 games now has 12 with the 3, they'll get to 15. So giving more of a sense of a normal length of a season rather than being so condensed. So these are all really positive things that are happening in athletics. We're progressing to the postseason, which is exciting for everybody, even though it's not going to have the same look as a typical year would have. Moving forward into the winter season, the state has come out, the CIAC has come out and indicated that we will have a winter season. At this point, they're saying that every winter sport will be played. Now, I'm not going to go into too much depth here because the final decisions are not going to be done until around November 10th or 11th. So I don't want to get anybody's hopes up, start talking about the winter season, and then everything changes, on the 10th or 11th of November. But we will move forward as an athletic department and have our winter sports night. It will be done virtually like we did for the fall sports. I will create a video of my portion, and then we'll have various Zoom meetings with the individual programs. I'll probably post my video portion and send listserv messages out probably within the first week of November, and then hold off on the Zoom meetings till we know more about the winter season, where we stand and which programs will indeed go forward. So this is where we are. I'd be willing to answer any questions as well.
Mike, this is Charlotte. I have a question. Thanks. When you say the decision will be made in November, who's going to make the decision? The CIAC or the Connecticut Department of Health? Or will they intend to come up with a collective decision at that point in time, hopefully?
Great question, as always. The department, the DPH has basically requested, made a request to the governor to separate themselves from making decisions for, in terms of athletics. So the CIAC has a whole medical committee that the governor is in full support of. So they will work in conjunction with this medical group to make the decisions for the 10th as to what sports will be safe. Obviously, the sports that are truly in question at this point are sports like wrestling, because wrestling is a high risk sport. They're talking about, incorporating some type of mask system if they can. I don't know what that's going to look like, but all these are all these questions that will be answered by the November 10th with this group. So this group will get together, kind of look at what the options are, and then make a recommendation to CIAC to whether to allow them to move forward with that sport or not, or let them move forward, but with these modifications. Okay, so that's basically what they're going to do over the next 3 or 4 weeks before they make the ultimate decision. What they did do is they sent out a schedule for every single sport. That's already set, but everybody understands that can change. Another sport that is really, really in question that they have to answer is indoor track, not because of the risk factor of the sport, but more because of the fact that most facilities that people use are associated with universities, and universities are not allowing anybody in. So it's more of a matter of, will there be a place to compete? So these are so many questions on every single sport as to basketball's indoors. Everything's the thing about winter is everything's indoors. So that's what makes it much more difficult. So so the DPH, long-winded answer to your question, but the DPH will not, at least what we're being told, will not be making any decisions for the winter.
Okay, and then we have is he our third Italian? Because he's our newest Mike Italian. Mike DiStefano is going to walk us through the special ed report that the board received in their packet. And he added a section which I thought was a wonderful addition towards the end, and he'll explain that to you. Mr.
Sure, and I hope everyone can hear me well. I'm having a little bit of audio issues. Could everyone hear me?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So one of the things I wanted to point out was this is my second board report, and in looking at it, I wanted to make some adjustments. And one thing that I've been doing is meeting weekly with Jennifer Del Conte so that we can align our reports. And we've been, it's been an agenda item on our weekly meeting to talk about how we could present as accurate and as informative information as possible to the board. So this looks similar to our last board report. I did make some adjustments, and I think the next board report will look a little bit different as well. I won't go through all the information because I want to answer any questions you may have. One of the things that I did want to point out is while I have a public venue is really emphasize the amazing work from our BTs, our TAs, our related service providers, our special education teachers are really, all the talk we had about COVID and all the difficulties with reopening. And when we get into special education, it even gets exemplified even further. And some of the work they're doing is just amazing in trying to implement IEPs amongst different cohort models, and it's really impressive. It's been great getting to finally, now that I'm in my second month, getting to meet the staff and the students and see how they're supported and the families. So that's great. A couple of highlights I just want to point out because I left something pretty similar. I did add a comparison from September to October. I think it might have been Mr. D'Agostino that pointed that out, and I wanted to make sure we have some information. Our cohort, our co-taught classes the sizes are pretty similar. The integrated support are pretty similar. Same with self-contained classes. We have increased our capacity within our bridge program. We're now we were at 8 students in September. We're now up to 10 students in October, which is great. And that's similar to what we were last year in October as well. One of the additions I put in here was our eligibility by classification, just so you have an idea of where our students are being found eligible for special education services. Under other health impairment, that category also includes students with ADHD, and then under learning disabilities, that also includes students who have a specific learning disability with dyslexia. The other I left other category because the numbers were very low. They could, students could be students who have a visual impairment, students who have a hearing impairment, students who have multiple disabilities. And those numbers were, in some cases were very low. One of the highlights I want to point out on page 4, I believe, is if you look at our referrals to special education, And I think this was a point, again, Mr. D'Agostino had mentioned about we talked at the last Board of Ed meeting about, 4 years out, it seemed like our numbers might be going down a bit. And I think Mr. D'Agostino had mentioned, we have to be cautious about that. And I think this exemplifies this point. In 2019, 2020, we had 12 referrals to special education for the school year. This year, at my board report last month, we had 2, now we have 12. So we've already matched our total referrals for last school year by the end of October. And, I think, and to tell you why I think that number is that way, I think part of it is looking back at last year. We never stopped, and again, I wasn't part of the district, but I believe the district never stopped, taking referrals for special education. But obviously, we were extremely limited in our ability to conduct evaluations and determine eligibility for special education. Plus, we weren't seeing kids in person, so there was less. There were definitely less referrals to special education. So I think the COVID piece impacted that number for the 1920 school year, making it much lower than it would have been. And then going into this school year, I think we have parents and teachers and who are concerned about students that they haven't seen in a very long period of time. And then also the emotionality piece is really impacting the referrals to special education as well. Students are struggling with their emotional well-being. As Dr. Penn pointed out, I also added in the last section some highlights. And again, all of our staff are doing some great things, but I believe maybe it was Mrs. O'Brien last month who talked a little bit about how could we build capacity to continue to build capacity to avoid out of district placement. Somebody had mentioned that question. And a couple of things that we're doing is one of the things Mr. D'Angelo, who is our department chair for special education, he is doing a program with Peg Dawson, who's an executive function guru, and he's going to be working on executive coaching, and that's something we would love to be able to build into our continuum of supports, especially our students who require the bridge program. Many of those students who struggle with emotionality also struggle with executive dysfunction. So that's something we would really like to tie in there. Another area where if we ever were to lose a student to an out of district placement, another area potentially is in the area of reading, where parents feel like their child isn't getting appropriate reading support and continues to struggle in reading even at the high school level. We have one of our special education teachers completing an Orton Gillingham certificate program, and that's already in conjunction with the hiring of our Orton Gillingham specialist who's with us 3 days a week. So we really feel like we have a really great continuum of support for students in the area of reading, especially in basic reading skills. And to go along with that, one of our speech and language pathologists is actually completing a certificate in dyslexia from the University of Florida. And although she's a speech and language pathologist, she works closely with our special education teachers, especially in the area of reading, to help support our students.
Thank you.
That's all I have. Any questions? Mr. D'Agostino?
So I have one. So my question relates to the Cohort C, which are the students that are not in school. Cohort C, not Cohort C. That's real bad. And I guess wearing the mask makes you a little kooky. But so anyway, do these numbers include all the students who may be out of school, homeschooling, or out of the district at this point? Or is there a potential that these numbers are reduced because some students are not in the building? Are we factoring that in? In other words, is there an increase if we go to an all-in model, or does this reflect all the students?
Yeah, I believe this reflects all the students. Our Cohort C students are obviously students we are really, we're most concerned about because we don't have eyes on them all the time. What we do for those students is we do what's called an implementation plan. So we send home to the parents because they've chosen to be part of the remote learning, we sent home a implementation plan on how the IEP will be implemented in that remote setting. Obviously, IEPs are written in, in-person instruction. So we send that home to them so they could understand what type of service and how we're going to implement that IEP while they are in distance learning.
Right. No, that's great. And thank you for your work with this report. It's very informative and it's very helpful to give us, projections moving out. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
That does it from the high school.
So my report is a continuation of the report that Dr. Harrison provided about professional learning in the month of October, broken down into 3 categories. We're really looking at the technology integration. And ultimately, of course, our goal is to focus our energy on integration, innovation, and more critical thinking. But for the immediate time, we first need to come into greater consistency across all 5 buildings. So some time has been spent aligning some practices within Google Classroom, the placement of assignments within tabs, the use and the understanding of the definitions within the different tabs in Google Classroom, and allowing some time for teachers to have discussions about what we might take for granted is common understanding, but in fact might be defined differently by different individuals. And getting a better understanding too that for students that may be juggling 10 Google Classrooms, the consistency really is that much more important when you're attempting to organize and keep track of so many different things. So some time has been spent on what we would call technical fixes. And then from there, moving into skill building, and building the skills is more about providing some time for teachers to acquire skills that can be mastered fairly easily. That then allows the balance of our time for teachers to really focus on collaborative work, tech integration, and continuing to build that distance learning model that will encourage students to approach their learning process, hopefully, in a more innovative and different manner. So it's not just adapting, but it's also innovating. And so the focus again in October has been mainly in the first 2 categories of that of those 3 ideas, but ultimately moving into more tech integration. Gwen?
I don't know if this is too specific, but I've seen some frustration about assignments being received, for instance, in Word or in PowerPoint, and then having to be sort of translated, for lack of a better phrase, into, and I'm wondering if we're trying to encourage teachers to be presenting things directly in Google Docs that then the students can type the answers right in. We're doing a fair amount of taking photos of things and then having to turn them in, which just adds a layer. And I don't know if there's a learning difference between writing something and typing the answers in.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's too sort of micro tiny, but
well, it's helpful to have a very specific example, because I think the submission of work has definitely been one of those topics for discussion. We were also hearing that in some cases, parents were being asked to drive things to school when the students were learning at home all the time. And so we wanted to clarify expectations for all teachers and for all families, that if you're choosing to learn from home, the only time a parent would need to come in might be to pick up a new set of resources or something of that nature, but that we should not be asking students to do a lot of translation in order to submit an assignment, or to print out dozens of pages in order to complete an assignment. That things should be submitted electronically, hopefully with a minimum number of steps to do the technical piece of things.
And I've only been recently dragged from Word into Google Docs, kicking and screaming the whole way. But it does have a really nice accessibility for your coworkers once you finally make it over. So thank you. Appreciate it. And that, because I know everybody's in a different place.
I have a question, and I apologize if I missed it, but it was my understanding from the last tri-board meeting that we were going to receive a breakdown of how the additional PD days were used, what we did as far as technology and training for teachers and stuff. I thought we were going to get like a breakdown of how we were doing that and what our plan was kind of moving forward. So I guess we got a little of the plan moving forward, but I was just wondering if.
Well, today is the
maybe-
20th, so we've already covered most of these topics. So I think you should assume that here at Barlow, that the teachers have already put a fair amount of energy into the discussion of the technical improvements that were necessary. I mean, I've read more comprehensive summaries of the sessions that have taken place here at Barlow. This is really providing an overview. The technical improvements in the skill building sessions have, for the most part, already occurred. Tomorrow's focus includes technology, but it's also work on the slow process.
I understand many of these skills have been covered in previous sessions. I was just hopeful that we were going to get a kind of a breakdown of what teachers have been, what tools teachers have been given to enhance their capabilities for remote instruction, and how we were doing that. Have all teachers been trained in Google Classroom? When did that take place? Did we train them in Zoom? I was just kind of hoping to get a better feel of how we've been utilizing those days so that we could articulate that when we're asked.
So we can give you a more specific breakdown of the exact use of the times of sessions, but the common naming convention, I mean, my examples include exactly the topics that have been addressed.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful to get a breakdown.
Well, and I guess too, like in the technology integration, if these are the ones that are coming up or we haven't spent as much time on there, there's some tools down in there. So we're saying we've been doing these. Is that the way to interpret this? That these are the tools that they've been learning?
I think that the way you should interpret the last category, the technology integration and innovation, is that is always in our mind as being a long-term goal. But I would say less time up to this point has been spent in that category than in the more practical conversation around where is the stream link placed within Google Classroom? How are people defining the term question within Google Classroom and things of that nature? But we can certainly provide the exact dates in October and what happened.
I just think to Mike's point, like if we're saying technical improvement, skill building, we focused on that on the 7th and the 14th. There's a little bit more of that to do on the 21st. And then the 28th, are we still in those same categories, or the 28th is all tech integration category? It would just be kind of helpful to understand. We've made strong inroads in technical improvements. We think we've got that in pretty good shape. The next couple of weeks are doing technical integration, and some of the examples you have here.
Okay.
Helpful.
We will do that.
I mean, there's always, we're always going to have things that we can continue to train them on, but we're just saying, we've got the bar to here, right? We've done technical improvements, naming convention. We're all good on that. We don't need to spend any more time, right? Like Zoom access. Everybody knows how to do that now. Everybody knows how to do Google.
We've
moving
done
on
the
to the
Zoom,
higher.
we've done the Google Classroom, but
exactly.
we can
So,
definitely articulate that if you'd like to have a sheet that. talks
everybody's
about
got
that.
calendaring and all that. We're moving on to the higher level stuff.
Yes.
On that. Yes.
Okay. All right. Any other questions on that? Thank you for the update. All right. Financials, I think.
Yes. So I'll give you an update in regards to the financials. Before I jump into that, I would like to give everyone a brief update on the conversion that we are in the process of doing from the Phoenix financial system to the eFinance Plus system. That is actively underway at the moment. We are budgeting for the 21-22 year in that tool now. That process has begun. So those doing budget entry have been trained in that process, and they're actively doing that in the new system. You will see some changes as that budget season rolls forward and those reports come through, but that's our first active live use of the system. In parallel, we're learning some of the reporting capabilities of the system, which are quite strong. We're doing payroll parallel to confirm all the setup is correct in the new system as well. And we will actively begin planning a day-by-day schedule in the December timeframe so that when it comes time for the cutover, we have a smooth cutover from December 31st with being the last activity that will occur in the current system, and then all new activity would start from January 1 onward. So that's moving along, and it's consuming a fair amount of time of the central office staff. If I come back then to the discussion we had earlier in regards to the financials for the estimate of required financials for the reopening, in the July timeframe, we had put together an estimate of $259,000 aggregate necessary to support the opening. And with the additional items that we just discussed, it brings the current actual spending that's occurred year to date, plus that additional planned spending right up to that 259 number. So it puts us basically right on the projection that was done previously. I think that the open question ultimately will be how many of these positions will be needed for 90 days or a period longer than 90 days. That said, the bulk of the spend, frankly, is coming in the non-staffing area by a long shot. So a lot of this is going to be expended and will occur. So how do we cover it? There are two major categories that I see, and I do think that we have, at the moment, I would say that we do have enough available sources to actually cover this incremental, and it comes from two main places. One of those places is the Coronavirus Relief Fund, which we had discussed previously. That was about $103,000. So that's going to get us a good chunk of the way there. The balance of it does come from savings in the current year budget, and there are many subcategories that comes from, but the primary categories where those savings come from is savings in transportation that have occurred year to date. Now, those savings occurred due to the extended school year program not occurring in the summertime, which we do budget for. In addition, there's some known reduction in transportation for outplacements as well. So that's a major component of that. Another major component was based on an action that the board took in their last meeting, which was to fund in the amount of approximately $85,000 worth of bond interest payments to come from the bond fund itself rather than from the budget. So that yields some additional flexibility in that budget line. The budget line was budgeted at $262,600, and if about 85 of that will be paid, that's available extra funding to help to cover this excess spending. So between those two, I think that we're looking essentially at close to a wash. Lots of time yet to go in the year, but I don't see any cause at this point for concern. Past that, the budget object summary really just reflects those various activities getting built out in the budget. It is in a bit of flux, and I think really will continue to be in a bit of flux, particularly also we're doing things in regards to purchase orders where we're not setting them up for full year in some cases due to the impending cutover at mid-year. So in the January timeframe is when this really should look the way that it should, and we'll have a much better view of what the year really looks like starting at that time. The last item I would just mention is you do have the health insurance report, and it does contain the September claims in it, which came in at $55,000 for the month, which I'll just note is the third lowest claims month in the last 5+ years. It is remarkably low. which continues a trend that we've been seeing for approximately a year now. Our first 2 months of this fiscal year really were at an average of about 185,000 for those first 2 months, which was consistent with the last 3 years on average. But we've got a very low month here in the month of September, so continue to see how that goes throughout the balance of the year and see what the year shapes up as, but I would not anticipate any issue there. That's all I have. I apologize, Todd, I didn't hear you.
The transfer report.
Sorry, the transfer report.
Yes, any
Those
questions?
clerical, one of them.
I'm sorry.
That one transfer is just the clerical, putting it into a different category, and then
So the first one was the one that was the board approved in the September board meeting last month, and then yes, the second one
it's
was
just clerical, yeah.
yes, right, was to move the money, instead of it being an instructional supply, it moved into software in the same functional area. It was in the STEM area, yeah.
Can you give me that coronavirus relief fund amount again? I started to write it down and then I moved on to something else, so.
Yep.
It was
It's
what?
102,879.
Okay. That's helpful, thank you. And before we move past it, I think it's appropriate to recognize the fact that in all likelihood, this is Mr. Rice's last Region 9 board meeting. And while I know you will surely miss these meetings that go on till 11 o'clock p.m. and cause you to miss your dinner and give you excessive amounts of agita, we will surely miss you, and we appreciate your service to our district and your commitment and your fine work that you've done over the last few years. And so I want to thank you, and I'm sure the entire board wants to express their appreciation to you as well.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Absolutely. It's been wonderful to work with.
Thank you. Well, it's been my opportunity to work with all of you as well.
We're going to miss you, Scott.
All right, any other administrative reports? All right, then we'll move on to item 8, committee reports. I think we've got one for audit. There's an update on there, and I'm sure policy met and has a riveting update for us.
There's no update on policy, so just pass me by this week.
Oh my goodness, all right.
You'll see a lot at the tri-board. That's when you'll see a lot.
Excellent. Cheryl, did you want to do?
Sure. The draft minutes from the audit committee are in the materials, but it was we had a good audit committee. The audit is going well. We have, just a reminder, we selected a new auditor back early in the summer, and that's going well. The work has started, so including this transaction testing, typical audit transactions, payroll, pension, long-term debt, capital assets, internal service fund. At the time we met, the auditors were still just starting to get all the trial balances and starting to review the detailed audit work. But we expect, and there is some new additional mandatory testing that's required by Connecticut State Department of Education. So there's additional transaction testing that was recently announced that all districts have to follow. But at this point, we expect the audit to be concurrent with past timetables, and that by December we'll have a set of final financial statements. And just a kind of administrative point, historically, we've had the board accept the financial statements, although it's really been more customary as opposed to something that's required. But again, that timetable should be in line with past years.
And Cheryl, by way of a question, those surveys can be sent back via DocuSign, or do they need wet copies?
I don't know. Todd, these are the fraud, Scott, these are the fraud questionnaires. I don't know if you know. I mean, Maureen, I think it's fine to DocuSign. I mean, I just had wet copies and I sent them over. I think there's also negative response. So if we didn't hear back the auditors didn't hear back by a certain date, then they'll presume that there were not, that the.
Okay, I sent it back with DocuSign and I just was clarifying.
That should be fine, Maureen.
Yeah. And just for clarity for the board members, everybody should have received. If you have not, there is a fraud attestation that we need everybody to do.
Right.
And get back to the auditors. So if you did not get that, let us know. We'll get it to you, but everybody should have received it.
Yep.
All right, other committee reports. I know there are some committees coming up, but I don't think we had too many highly unusual. We usually have lots of committee meetings with anybody else. Any other board members have any other committee meetings? I know the calendar's kind of full in the next couple of weeks with meetings.
Pension is meeting October 26th, and budget and curriculum are working on a joint committee meeting on November 13th. So,
And as always, policy every Friday.
Welcome to join if you like.
With that, I feel like no other committee reports, so we'll move on to item 9, public comments. And we still have members of the public on, so we'll ask if you would like to speak from the public, wave your hand or raise the hand symbol so we can identify you. Please identify yourself, name and address, and limit your comments to 2 minutes or less if you don't mind. So we will open it up for public comment. If anyone would like to comment, please indicate and we'll unmute you so you can comment. Board members can help me scan the screens.
I just looked, I didn't see any.
no.
I don't see any as well. All right, then we will move on to item 10, board member comment. Any members of the board? Any other comments? The only comment I have, again, thanks everyone remotely for participating as well as here in the room and trying this out. I'll do an informal polling of the board members to see, administration to see how it went, so we can decide what to do in our next upcoming meeting. I don't think this will work for the joint board meeting since we have so many people, 21 board members in that, but maybe depending on how this was for the people remote on Zoom and quality, and everybody here in the room for quality and wearing the headsets and so forth. We'll make a determination for the next meeting. So thanks everyone for that. If no other board member comment, then I will look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, Mike, do I have a second?
Second, Karen.
And there's a second. All right, all in favor? By aye.
Aye.
I'm looking across everybody. It looks unanimous. So we are adjourned at 10:38 p.m. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks.
Travels home and.
Thank you for making that work. Did these hurt the heck out of your ear?
Yes.
Oh, my God.
Especially the glasses.
Yeah, the glasses and the.